A quiet gesture, the seed of something unforeseen. The sky over Louisville was the color of worn graffitlo, damp and heavy, as if it might collapse at any moment. Track 3 lay nearly empty, except for the sound of rain tapping steadily on the metal awning and the slow slither of puddles down the cracked platform. Callie James stood beneath a flickering light pole, arms crossed tightly over her threadbare coat. Her fingers were stiff with cold. In her pocket was the last $10 bill she owned, what remained after buying a one-way train ticket to Chicago and a bitter cup of vending machine coffee. She glanced at the clock above the station kiosk. 17 minutes until departure. She avoided looking at the shuttered cafe nearby, knowing she couldn't afford even a tea. Then came the voice, soft and stammering. "Excuse me, I hate to ask, but could you help me?" Callie turned. A man stood at the edge of the awning, his coat damp and sagging, hair clinging to his forehead. His beard was rough, and his eyes stared, pale blue, apologetic met hers, with something between hope and defeat. "I had my wallet stolen. I just need $10 for a ticket home," he said, shivering. "I don't expect you to believe me, but I promise I'll pay it back." Callie didn't respond right away. Her gaze flicked to his hands reddened, raw from cold, and then to the fine tremor in his jaw. "Is there anyone you can call?" He shook his head. "No one answers, and my phone's dead." "And how do I know you're telling the truth?" Her voice was cautious but not unkind. "You don't," he admitted. "But I swear, I'm not trying to scam you. I just want to get home." Her hand slid into her coat pocket. The $10 bill was soft and crumpled, like something handled too many times in fear. A voice inside her said no. Another, quieter voice said, "Maybe this is who you are." Without another word, she extended her hand. "This is probably stupid," she murmured, "but I believe you." He took the bill carefully, as if afraid it might disappear. "I'll pay you back," he said, voice cracking. "Just get home," Callie whispered. The train pulled in then, hissing and loud. He stepped away, disappearing into the swelling crowd. In moments, he was gone. She stood there alone, rain clinging to the sleeves of her coat, the platform stretching out before her like a road to nowhere. Part 2. The wind against her. Falling in a city that doesn't look back. The train rocked steadily through fields and forgotten towns. Callie drifted in and out of a dreamless half-sleep, waking only when the conductor announced Chicago. She arrived 37 minutes late. The woman at the front desk didn't look up right away. When she did, her voice was flat. "I'm sorry. Your appointment was at 10. The interviewer left 20 minutes ago." Callie didn't plead. She knew what hunger did to your pride. It stripped it away, layer by layer. She walked the city's cold grid, her shoes soaked through. Every traffic light seemed timed to slow her down. Every doorway she passed was not meant for her. The boarding house she'd scraped money to rent gave her 3 nights. On the 4th, the landlord stood outside her door with arms crossed. "You said Friday. I just need 2 more days." So did the last one who couldn't pay. She packed in silence. 3 changes of clothes, a spiral notebook with poetry her mother once read aloud, and a prepaid phone that hadn't buzzed in weeks. That night, she slept upright in the back corner of the public library. No one asked her to leave yet. But the next night, the security guard said the building was closing early. She wandered until nearly dawn, finally curling up under the eaves of a closed diner. The concrete was cold. Her stomach was worse. She thought about the $10, about the man, about how some choices feel right until they leave you stranded. Still, she hadn't regretted it. Not yet. A quiet act, unnoticed by the world, unforgettable to one. The park in the center of the city was nearly empty that morning, mist curling over the grass like breath in cold air. Callie sat on her usual bench near a rusted statue of a Civil War general, her knees drawn to her chest, trying to preserve what little warmth remained in her body. She hadn't eaten in almost 2 days. The ache in her stomach had dulled into a low, persistent hum background noise to the louder silence in her mind. That was when she noticed the woman. She was old, perhaps in her 70s, but she moved with a steadiness that suggested she had long made peace with the world. A soft gray shawl was wrapped around her shoulders, and in her hands was a small paper bag. She walked directly toward Callie and stopped, not unkindly, not hesitantly. "You look hungry," she said, her voice gentle. Callie's first instinct was to recoil, pride rising like a reflex. "I'm fine," she said automatically. The woman smiled and slowly sat down beside her. She placed the bag on the bench between them and opened it. Inside was a thick sandwich, homemade. Uneven slices of bread, ham, cheese, a touch of mustard. "I bring an extra," the woman said softly. "Sometimes I don't need it. Sometimes someone else does." Callie stared at the food, jaw tight. "I can't take that," she whispered. "Why not?" the woman asked, turning toward her. "Is your pride bigger than your hunger?" Callie's eyes dropped. "I used to think the same way, but pride never fed me," the woman added without judgment. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Callie reached out. Her hands trembled as she peeled back the wax paper. The first bite hit her like grief hot. Real. Overwhelming. "Thank you," she said, barely able to say the words. The woman nodded. "There's a soup kitchen on Halstead and Monroe, few blocks east. They serve lunch, and they're short on help." Callie looked at her. "You think they'd let me work?" The woman stood, pulling her shawl tighter. "Ask for Carol. Tell her Ruth sent you." And with that, she turned and walked away. Callie sat there, the sandwich in her lap, feeling something unfamiliar rise inside her. It wasn't hopenot quite, but it was the shape of it. The warmth that flickers back into life, unnoticed by the city. Later that day, she found the soup kitchen. The building was modest, its brickwork faded and peeling around a sun-bleached sign, Hearthlight. Inside, the air smelled of tomato stew and warm cornbread. A woman in her 50s stood behind a counter, sleeves rolled, clipboard in hand, eyes sharp but not unkind. "Carol?" Callie asked. The woman turned. "Who's asking?" "Ruth. Ruth sent me." Carol's face softened just slightly. "Ruth's got an eye for people. You willing to work?" Callie nodded. "Then wash your hands and grab an apron." The first few hours passed in a blur. She chopped onions, wiped tables, stacked trays. Her fingers moved mechanically, but her mind stirred, observing, listening. People came in with hollow eyes and tired feet, but they said thank you. Some smiled. One old man told jokes no one laughed at but himself. A girl with knotted hair gave Callie a crayon drawing a blue flower and a crooked sun. When the rush ended, Carol pressed a white envelope into her hand. "Just a stipend," she said, "for showing up." Callie opened it outside, on the curb beneath a street lamp. Inside was a $20 bill. Enough for a bus pass, maybe a few days of small things. But more than that, it was recognition, a quiet confirmation that she existed, and that maybe she still had something to offer. That night, she slept lighter. The face she never expected to see again, the moment when time bends. It was a quiet Thursday at Hearthlight. The lunch crowd had thinned. A few regulars lingered over coffee in chipped mugs. Callie was humming softly to herself, wiping down tables with practiced rhythm, her apron dusted with flour. The bell above the door rang. She didn't look up at first, used to the stream of latecomers. But something about the silence that followed the bell made her glance toward the entrance. A man stood there. His coat was long, tailored, his shoes polished, his hair was neatly combed back, and a leather briefcase hung from his shoulder. But it wasn't the clothes that caught her attention. It was his eyes. Pale blue, familiar. He stood still, as if uncertain whether to step forward, and then their eyes met. A flicker, a beat, something shifted. Callie froze, the rag in her hand going limp. He approached slowly, stopping just a few feet from her. "Hi," he said. His voice was warmer than she remembered, more confident but unmistakable. She stared. Her voice was barely a whisper. "It's you." He smiled gently. "It is." "The train station," she said, barely breathing. He nodded. "You gave me your last $10. Her mouth opened, then closed. She glanced down at her hands, still wrapped in the cloth, then back at him. I never even knew your name. David, he said. David Mercer. Callie repeated the name silently, as if it might dissolve in her mouth if she said it aloud. I came back the next day, he said, to the station. I waited, but you were gone. I had to leave, she murmured. I know, he replied. I didn't forget your face. There was a pause, fragile and suspended. What are you doing here? She asked. Passing through, he said. Saw the sign. Something told me to stop. She raised an eyebrow, not quite believing it. I owe you something, he added. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a crisp $10 bill, unfolded carefully, like it had been carried for a long time. Callie let out a short breath knot, a laugh, not disbelief, just the sound of a life catching up with itself. He extended the bill. She took it, their fingers brushing. Thank you, she said softly. But he didn't leave. I'd also like to take you to coffee. Or dinner, if you'll let me. Callie blinked. The memory of rain and cold and desperation still clung to the edges of this man. But he was no longer the stranger she once found under the station awning. You're not who I thought you were, she whispered. No, he said. And neither are you. Part 6. What was hidden? Beneath the surface, the story no one sees. They sat across from each other in a quiet cafe, a few blocks from the soup kitchen. The chairs didn't match. The jazz playing overhead was slightly out of tune. David ordered her chamomile tea. She hadn't had anything that warm, that gentle, in weeks. You're probably wondering who I really am, he said. She smiled faintly. The thought crossed my mind. He handed her a business card, sleek, matte black. David Mercer, founder, executive director. The Mercer Collective. She read it slowly. The name rang distant bells. The Mercer Collective, she said aloud. You run that? He nodded. We work with cities to build better systems for transitional housing, trauma support, small business grants. We partner with community shelters and micro-entrepreneurs. It started with one pilot. Then it grew. Callie blinked. She had read about it once, back when she still had a library card and evenings to spare. But that night, she said, at the station, I was running a personal trial, he said. We were preparing to launch a campaign focused on understanding the blind spots in support systems. I wanted to know what it felt like, to be out there, without status, without a name. He sipped his coffee, watching her closely. I planned everything, except getting my wallet stolen on day one. Callie exhaled in quiet surprise. So you were really stranded? I was, and no one helped me. Not one person, except you. She looked down into her tea, unsure of what to feel. I didn't know who you were. I didn't do it for anything in return. I know, he said gently. That's why it mattered. He leaned back, his voice more thoughtful now. You helped me when I had nothing to offer. I never forgot that. Callie said nothing for a moment. The steam from her cup blurred the space between them. What are you saying? She asked finally. He smiled again, slight, honest. I'm saying I've been looking for you. When a door opens that wasn't supposed to exist. David's voice was calm, but there was a quiet urgency beneath it, something that came not from pity, but purpose. At the collective, he said, we're building a new division, one focused on direct community-led initiatives outreach that doesn't just serve, but listens. Callie watched him cautiously, unsure whether this was a conversation or an audition. I want you to be a part of it, he said. Her brows furrowed. You want me to work there? With us? Yes. I don't have a degree, she said quickly. I don't have a resume. I'm not. Let me stop you right there, he said gently. We've hired people with Ivy League backgrounds and people who grew up in shelters. What matters isn't the paperwork. It's what you've lived through. It's what you did when you had nothing. She looked away, the old shame rising in her throat again like smoke from a long-dead fire. I've been surviving, she said. That's all. David nodded slowly. Exactly. And now, I'd like to help you build something that helps others survive. Maybe even something more. Callie stared at him. Outside, the wind shifted the trees against the window pane. The moment felt both enormous and impossibly quiet. "What would I even do?" she asked. "First, we'd get you stable," he replied. "A place to stay, a little structure, then training, community planning, outreach design. You'd shadow our project leads. Eventually, I want you leading a program of your own." Callie blinked. "I don't even know where I'd begin." "You already have," he said, "the moment you handed me that $10 bill. Laying bricks from broken ground." 3 weeks later, Callie stepped into the Mercer Collective headquarters in a refurbished firehouse in Logan Square. The walls were brick and worn, but the air buzzed with quiet intention. David introduced her not as a guest or a charity case, but as part of the team. He said her name clearly, like it belonged. She began training how to read funding proposals, how to assess need without imposing assumptions, how to measure impact beyond numbers. She shadowed teams in food banks, transitional shelters, public schools. Her confidence grew not in leaps, but in steady, quiet returns. And then, one morning, David handed her a folder. "Your first pilot project," he said. Inside was a typed summary of the idea she had shared during a late conversation over boxed takeout, a mobile outreach van that didn't just bring food, but conversation, hygiene supplies, and dignity to where people already were. She called it the Ember Line, a nod to something barely burning that could still ignite warmth. They funded the prototype. The day the van was delivered, a simple white vehicle painted with soft orange lines and a single word on its side, Ember. She stood in the lot and cried quietly, away from the team. The first evening route stopped near an overpass where she had once tried to sleep. They served 73 people. But more than food, Callie offered something else. She listened, remembered names, looked people in the eye. And people came back. The past returns, but softer now, almost like grace. It was late afternoon when she saw her again. Callie had just finished restocking the Ember van after a morning run. The team had packed up early forecast, called for rain. She sat alone on a bench outside the collective, unwrapping a granola bar with stiff fingers, when she noticed someone walking toward her from the corner. The shawl came first, then the gentle stride. Callie stood so quickly she nearly dropped her food. "Ruth?" The older woman smiled as if she'd been expected all along. "I wondered when I'd run into you again," she said. Callie rushed forward, embracing her without hesitation. It was the first hug she had initiated in months. "I never got to thank you properly," Callie said. "That sandwich, it kept me going." Ruth touched her cheek gently. "It was just a sandwich. You did the rest." They sat down together, time folding softly between them like a blanket. Ruth listened as Callie spoke about the soup kitchen, about Hearthlight, about David. When Callie mentioned his name, Ruth's smile shifted. She leaned back, watching a bird land on the curb. "You know," she said lightly, "he's my son." Callie blinked. "What?" "David. Yes, that one," she added with a chuckle. "Always needed to see things for himself. Stubborn, but his heart's in the right place." Callie sat there, stunned, the pieces rearranging themselves in her mind. "You sent me to Carol," she said slowly. "You knew." "I knew you needed something," Ruth said. "And I knew he needed to understand why people like you matter. That sandwich was just a way to cross the street." Callie swallowed hard, suddenly aware of just how long her journey had been and how many invisible hands had helped her stay upright. "It's strange," she murmured, "how small things to lead to everything." Ruth nodded, brushing lint from her skirt. "They always do. Love, not declared but known." Over the months that followed, David and Callie grew closer. Not quickly, not loudly. He stopped by her team's meetings with coffee. They shared quiet jokes in the office kitchen. Some nights, they walked the long blocks between neighborhoods, just talking about loss, about cities, about the weight of being needed. He never pushed. She never asked for more than he gave, but something bloomed between them, anyway patient, like something that had waited through the frost. One evening, After a citywide dinner hosted by the collective, they found themselves alone on the rooftop of the building. Callie looked out at the skyline. "It used to scare me," she said. "Chicago. Felt like it didn't have space for someone like me." David stood beside her. "It didn't," he said, "until you made it." They didn't kiss, but they didn't need to. In that moment, silence was the most honest thing they could share. A road opens, but not all routes can follow. The city had just begun to thaw from winter's hold. The trees in the community garden behind the collective were beginning to bud, and volunteers had returned to till the raised beds. Children dug in the soil with plastic shovels. Laughter came easy. David was quiet that afternoon. He walked beside Callie along the garden's gravel path, hands in his coat pockets. She could tell he was turning something over in his mind. Finally, near a bench beneath a budding magnolia tree, he stopped. "They offered me a position," he said. "A new office, New York." Callie looked at him, her chest tightened, but she didn't speak. "They want to expand the collective, a full outreach wing, urban, cross-regional." He turned to her. "I told them I wouldn't go unless I asked you first." Callie blinked. "Asked me to go with you?" He nodded. "To help lead it. Together." She sat slowly on the bench, her breath catching. The idea was huge, an entire network of new programs. More people reached. More lives changed. And yet the city around her held weight. "I love what we're doing here," she said softly. "This place. It was the first to see me, to give me a name again." David didn't interrupt. "There's still work to do," she said. "People here still need what we're building." He nodded, a quiet understanding in his eyes. "I thought you might feel that way." She looked up at him. "Are you disappointed?" "No," he said gently. "I admire you more for it." They sat in silence for a while, the sounds of spring stirring around them. "We'll make it work," he said eventually. "Different cities. Same thread." She smiled at him, eyes full of a love that didn't need explaining. "You're going to do incredible things there." "So are you," he replied. "Right here." They planned it slowly. He would leave in the fall. She would remain in Chicago, running Ember and supporting new local initiatives. They would stay connected, weekly calls, shared proposals, late-night updates filled with hope. The road wasn't ending, it was simply parting, just wide enough for both to walk in parallel. A moment held. A circle quietly closed. 1 year later, the Ember Line was no longer a prototype, it was a network. Multiple vans, expanded staff, partnerships across the city. They served thousands, but still focused on one simple truth: every person mattered. Callie had just returned from a panel discussion at City Hall. She stepped into the Hearthlight Community Center, the new one, recently opened in a converted warehouse. There were showers, art therapy rooms, job mentoring, a small garden behind the kitchen. Balloons floated along the ceiling. A banner read, "1 year of Ember." She moved slowly through the celebration, overwhelmed in the best way. Then she saw him. David stood near the serving table, holding a bouquet of wildflowers, and something else she couldn't see just yet. Their eyes met. "You came back," she whispered as they embraced. "I told you I would." The room quieted, as if it knew something was about to shift. David reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. But first, he unfolded a crisp $10 bill, carefully flattened. "I've carried this with me," he said, "for a year. Not because I owed you, but because I needed to remember the moment that changed everything." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, timeless. "You gave me something money can't buy. Faith. Let me spend the rest of my life proving you were right." Callie didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, voice full and steady. The applause came like light breaking through morning fog. They stood beneath the string lights, hands clasped, the past behind them, not forgotten, but finally quiet. Later that evening, as music played and people danced, Callie held the $10 bill one last time before folding it away. "A small kindness," she whispered, "can start something bigger than we'll ever understand."